And another tiny, tiny beginning. Here's our little circle and swirls beginning for our quilt. Again, we'll keep it on this chair so you can see it grow. But there's its beginning. Okay, how are you everybody doing on their quilts? Have you chose one to work on yet? Hope so. We're going to work a little bit on our circles and swirls. My first two pieces here, okay, I'm going to put them together and add the sashing as I go. So let's just flip these over, line them up, and we're going to do them the same way we've been doing our strips and strings quilt. This allows us to use the scraps of batting that we have. Okay. I have a full skewer here, and I broke one in half, filed the end down so that it won't be snaggy, and using it for catching my needle and lifting it up for me so that it's easier for me. Since I have arthritis in my hands, sometimes they swell, kind of like they are now, and it's hard to, a lot of times, do intricate things. And catching my needle on the other side when it is hard sometimes. So that just helps, lifts it up a little bit off that batting and allows me to catch it. We're going to pull these two together. Okay. Need to catch that a little farther over. It is okay to go all the way through and I'll show you in just a minute, because if you don't come more than about 1/8 of an inch, your sashing will cover on the other side. So if you want to go all the way through all fabrics, not just the batting, that is okay. Want it to come up and meet like a nice, think of doing sutures here, and you're going to have a nice healed scar here when you get through. It's nice and even, not puckery, not raised. Two pieces just meet each other well. Okay, let's see what we're doing here. You see how it's coming through on this side? That's perfectly okay because our sashing is going to cover that. Okay. But you don't want to go way wide with it, because then your sashing won't be wide enough to cover what your stitches are showing. Keep it flat. Just whip stitch it all the way down. Keeping it as tight as it needs to be to stay together nicely, but not pull up, not pucker, stays flat seam. I am using 2 strands of embroidery floss on my quilts. That's what I'm sewing them with. Okay, coming down to the end here. That skewer for me is a lifesaver. Just makes doing this so much easier. If you have a chopsticks or a skewer or just a dowel, just not too big because you can't get your needle up and over it well. The skewer seems to be just the perfect size for me. And I just, just catch them in the kitchen section of a dollar store or Walmart, or get a whole bag of them. Okay, sorry about that. I had to check something on my computer. Okay, let's finish this up. Little fuzzies sticking out here. Don't need any fuzzies. Okay, now I can bring this down and just make me a little knot here. Tie that off really well. Okay, we have our first 2 joined together. Nice and flat. Okay. Flip it over. Okay, there we go. That looks nice and flat. Now we're going to put the sashing on it. And for the swirls and circles quilt here, I'm going to use, I've got a basket of batik scraps that I have here, and I have some more in the closet I got to pull out, see what I've got in the batik section. So I'm going to be using batiks, in other words, on this quilt, because I want those beautiful colors and that variegation of color, because it's going to fit this motif so well. Something like that is really pretty. I want to keep the Scrappy going and also diversify our color in there. So I'm going to use more batik pieces, okay, to do that. I'll lay that down the center. Okay, so that will be the sashing for our first part here. First 2 blocks. Now these quilts are, especially 3 of them that I have planned, will take me, I believe, through 2025 to complete them all. And so I have my year laid out for me. I will be doing other videos on other things in between, but these 3 quilts are my primary projects for 2025 here at Icky Chic Designs. So jump in and play with us. There's our sashing for these first 2, okay? All right. Let's sew them. Sew it down, see what happens. What color do we want? How about yellow? I think I like yellow. Each sashing that I make will be different. I mean, I'll just use different fabric combinations, but they all will be batiks. Because, like I said, the variegation of color in the batiks that I have anyway really lends itself to this quilt. It'll be scrappy, but it'll be on the elegant scrappy side. Is there such a thing as elegant scrappy? Well, in my world there is. So we'll do it that way. I am having just an enjoyable time doing this quilt series with all of y'all, because I believe it is an alternative for a lot of people. I believe it's a way to make a quilt for a lot of people who just wouldn't do it otherwise. And I believe it opens up a window and door for people to work outside their comfort zone, get out of their box. I believe it helps us to be designers at heart, learning to improvise, also learning to make do with what we have, because we're using scraps, and save some of the landfill from all this fabric. Okay, we're going to do on the inside strip, I'm going to do a back stitch, I believe. Batik doesn't ravel as much as a lot of other cotton fabrics, but it will ravel, so don't think that it won't. I'm not going all the way into that, even though this is a back stitch. I'm not going all the way into the point of the last stitch. I'm giving it a little space, okay? So it's going to look more like a running stitch. But this back stitch is a very strong stitch, and so I'm going to use it down this centerpiece on this, and I just believe it'll strengthen my connection even more between my two blocks. You don't have to do that, a running stitch. You know, you're going to put a lot of stitches in this. I'm going to stitch the center down, then I'm going to stitch the outer piece down. If I feel like my seam needs more strength, I can always add a piece from the back side across my connection there. Don't sweat the stitches. Don't. You see, I've got all sizes. I even get a little crooked there. Just bring it back in line. Don't sweat this part. It's a scrappy quilt, remember? All that is just extra charm. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for beauty and joy. I like that yellow. Looks good on this. The other thing about batik fabric is it's denser than a lot of, more tightly woven in a lot of cases than some other of your quilting fabrics. And so it takes a little bit more to get a needle through it sometimes, especially when you're doing several layers like I'm doing right now. I've got the batting. I've got this piece of sheer fabric over the top. Then I have 2 layers of batik. So it's another reason why you don't want to make tiny little stitches when you're doing these quilts. Make reasonable size stitches that fit your capabilities, and put as many stitches in as your piece needs. Okay, that came down this side very nicely. Okay, now let's go down the other side of this centerpiece. I'm going to be putting these quilts together, the circles and swirls and the landscape quilt. I will be building the rows and columns different than the strips and strings quilt, okay? Because of the design factor. Trying to find a way that I can do this as easy on my hands as I can. Keep everything workable for me. Make sure that it's something that's easily done, you know, lap work. Just don't need a hoop, don't need a machine. Coming along. Probably not going to have enough thread to get to the end, which hurts my feelings, but it'll be all right. God, leave me enough to tie off without yanking my thread out of my needle. Let's load it up again. I got 2 strands left here. Let's see how far we can get with that. Now, you do not have to use batik just because I am, okay? This is scrap quilt, so whatever scraps that you have, you can use. You can continue to use the fancy fabrics that we're putting in, the flowers or the circles. You can continue to use those and build your sashing with that. That's perfectly fine too. Or if you have some other fabric you want to include, it's your quilt. Please do it your way. I have years of collecting, so I'm trying in my old age to use up what I collected over years. I worked for quite a few years secularly, so therefore I didn't have a whole lot of time. You know, raising a family and a job and everything, you all know how that is. But I did think about, what am I going to do when I retire? You know, I won't have a lot of money to go out and buy new stuff. So I collected along, and I did it through the ways that I'm showing you, thrifting and other ways like that to make it happen, you know. Let me tell you how you can get some of these fabrics. A couple people have said they just don't have the fabrics. Well, one of the things I have recommended over and over is scarves. Use scarves. Now, I know if you live in the United States, where we have the Goodwill, and in some cities they have the bins, you can pick up scarves all day long, and when you pay by weight, those scarves, I mean, I did that one time with a friend, and I think my scarves probably ended up costing me about 8 cents each by the time I paid for them. It was a tremendous score for me. I can't walk those big stores anymore and stand like that and go through bins anymore, so I can't do that anymore. So a lot of times I can stop at a thrift store for a little bit. I can stop by a yard sale one for a little bit and check those things out like that. Don't forget your lingerie. If you're in a thrift store or Goodwill or yard sales, anything like that, and they have lingerie, lots of nightgowns and pajama sets are made with silky fabrics. Very pliable, very pretty colors. So don't forget lingerie. If I'm going to a thrift store, one of the first places I look after I check the scarves is blouses, because that's where I find the secondary most amount of fabrics, because lots of shells and blouses are made with very fancy fabrics, very soft, pliable fabrics. Another one is, have you ever checked the lining to jackets and skirts? The lining fabric is a lot of times very usable for something like this. Some dresses, especially party type dresses, are made with the soft, pliable fabrics. I mean, there's so many fabric out there that they use for things like that you can certainly do some of those. And some wraps, you know, what you would call maybe a sweater type thing, but it's not made out of knit or yarn, but it's made out of fabric, but it's a wrap, shawl type thing. That would be great too. Like I said, yard sales, estate sales, Goodwill, the bins, thrift shops, secondhand stores, and don't forget your own closet. If you're ready to clean out your closet, check the fabrics. Make sure that you don't throw good fabric away that you could use in your quilts. Okay. Just a lot of different places. A lot of times schools and other institutions will have rummage sales to raise money. Check them out for clothing that you can cut up and use. And sometimes if you're really starting from scratch and you'd have nothing, then give yourself 6 months. Say, I'm going to collect fabric for 6 months, and then I'm going to jump in and make this particular quilt. And continue your fabric collection. Organize them as you go. Put them in containers. Store them until you're ready to start your quilt. If you know people who quilt or sew, you might ask them to pass on their offcuts and their scraps. Most of the time, they don't contend with those, they just chunk them. And so don't be afraid to ask. That yellow has just really looked good on this particular color combination. It's going to be a good, probably going to use it quite a bit on the sashing because it just looks good. Doesn't that look nice? Okay. Whoa, whoa. You also might think about check in your area if there are any clothing manufacturers. A lot of times they throw their offcuts in bins and people can buy them by the sack or the weight. There used to be a factory here that made prom dresses, and I got a lot of my trims years ago from that, my fabrics from that. And also there's a business here that makes custom nursery layette sets, and while they have a lot of offcuts of cotton fabrics, which are great for scrappy quilts. There is another one that is a custom sewer. She sews clothing, or also what do you call it? What do you call it when you customize something already made? Anyway, she does that, and oftentimes she has scraps too. So there's just different places that if you use your imagination, you can pick up this fabric. Okay, now one of the things that you're going to notice right off the bat is that this fabric is closer to the sashing than this one. Okay, that is not a problem. Don't worry about that. Don't sweat it. This does not have to be perfect. When you get this whole quilt together and it's got all these circles everywhere, do you think you're really going to notice that little bit of difference? No, you're not. Okay, because it's going to be like that all over. Now, I still haven't done the 2 outside running stitches. Can you see that, what I'm talking about? All right, I'm going to do that right now over that. Okay, and then I will come back and we will start the next set of circles. Okay, till then, stay scrap happy.